Okay, and welcome to the Speech Bubble. I am Eleanor, and welcome to our first Creators Cage podcast. I'm joined here by some friends of mine. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, my name's Alex Free.
My name is Shannon Greenaway.
DFG second names, but it's alright. So today, for our first creator, we're going to be talking about Stephen King. I feel like when you think like horror or like thriller now, he's like the head post you think of. His like faces everywhere. The books are all in the shops. All the films, a lot of film adaptations are his. So we know him mostly, that's not a word, mainly as Carrie, It, Pet Sematary, and of course, The Shining. If you're films, you definitely know The Shining. And he's kind of spanned pretty widely across film and literature. If you didn't know about like him as a person, he's done drink, he's done drugs, he's had 2 near-death experiences, which I found out when I was reading Misery, because I'm pretty sure that book is him just exposing about his life. So when I said like Stephen King to you, what was like the first thing that probably popped into your brain for him?
The first thing I kind of think of are like horror movies and like horror novels, and also kind of not like your typical horror. Like all of these stories have quite a unique kind of turn to them. They're not that generic like there's a murderer, someone dies. There's always something more to it and a bit like
I'm
more
telepathic.
Yeah.
This girl has blood on her
she's
face.
like she's telepathic and she's bullied. Like it's just like it goes
Spice up a bit.
like he died and then he can see the future. Like it's really kind of unusual and obscure kind of plot lines. I think keep the stories really fresh and interesting.
I don't actually think of any of the books. I think of the films, ironically, and there's less of them than there are books.
Yeah, definitely. Which is really hard, I think, with like, films and books, because some of like his most iconic stories, obviously, like for me, I always go to The Shining, just because I just remember it being kind of disturbing. But we kind of know it's like a Stanley Kubrick film, and therefore, can we still be like, oh yeah, Stephen King, that's definitely his work. When you think of The Shining now, everyone's like, that's Stanley Kubrick's film. I remember that. And I remember like Jack Nicholson from like, the actor, and that's the Shining actor.
Yeah.
And then I just think that's where it kind of gets a bit like, ugh. Like, can we still give him that sort of credit? So for things like Carrie and It, they're obviously things that have been remade more recently. It being one of the more recent ones, Pet Sematary, and they're a lot of his older books.
Yeah.
Like, do you know? Like, so if I said to you like old recent works, do you know any of them?
There's a book that I have, the Sleeping Beauties
Yeah.
book, that makes zero sense.
Yeah, it's
And
just
isn't
2017.
scary.
That was the thing I remember when you
Yeah.
first got that. You was like, I don't see anything scary about this
It's
book.
not. It's a town where women go to sleep in cocoons, and if you wake them up, they become feral.
Yeah, and that's
I don't-
so that was 2017. I think I looked it up.
Yeah.
And I remember seeing that, and no one really kind of knows
Knows
it
it.
exists.
I did not know till this moment.
I feel like
so.
I feel like if you say Stephen King, it's like Carrie, The Shining,
Yeah.
It, Pet Sematary, maybe Misery, and that's like
Yeah.
where.
Clearly his like peak was like 70s, 80s, because
Yeah.
even more filmmakers, they kind of just ignore his recent stuff, and they're like,
Yeah, because it's
go back
always
to
the
70s
same.
and 80s.
It's always the same movies because Carrie's been done a lot. It's already been done.
Yeah, there's films from the 80s like before them.
Shining's never been remade.
Yeah, I think it'd be pretty hard, but of course they've now bringing out
Yeah.
the prequel, brought out. No, is it a prequel? I haven't seen it. It's a prequel or a sequel?
Sequel.
It's a sequel.
Yeah.
Oh. I've heard some mixed reviews about it though, so
Yeah.
not sure about that one. But I think it kind of says something about his work if we're like, he has recent stuff, but we don't care about that.
I feel like with his work, a lot of people kind of like the 80s nostalgia of it.
Yeah.
So they tend to like look more at like the Carries and
Yeah.
the Shinings, like more of those like older books, because they kind of get that time period kind of nostalgia of it.
Yeah.
Whereas the newer books, I feel like where he's trying to make more novels that are going to be like, oh, I want a new like hit. It's like they've still got the obscure kind of stories, like you were saying about like
Yeah.
the cocoons and feral women, but it's kind of like, oh, this doesn't quite hit the same.
Yeah,
as-
I feel like
different.
it's more writing to the time period, whereas the older books are sort of.
Yeah. So I looked into some more recent ones. So his most recent works for the last 2 years include a book called Elevation, which is the most recent 2018, The Outsider, which is also 2018. That one I'd kind of heard a little bit about, but not really. And Sleeping Beauties in 2017, which, like I said, I remember you got it because you were like, no. And he also brought us a book out in 2017, which never heard of. And this name, it's called Gwendy's Button Box.
Oh,
Yeah.
Never heard of it.
Never heard of it. No idea what it's about, where it came from. And
seamstry.
clearly I don't. Yeah. Clearly I don't think most other people do. And the reason I put it up because So the Outsider Elevation, I remember seeing it, and I remember it got like trashed by like reviews. A lot of critical reviews were like, yeah, it's good, it's Stephen King, he's back at it again. So the Outsider was really adored by the Guardian. I couldn't really find anything on Elevation from the critics, which might say something in itself, really. But then, so like everyday people. So when I was looking on like
Sorry.
Goodreads and things, so a lot of people absolutely slated Elevation for the pure fact that it's not horror. They were like, it was like
Yeah.
marketed as a horror, and everyone picked it up to read it and were like, this isn't even horror, it's a sci-fi book, and it had these long descriptions of like science and all these technical terms that people were like, I
Yeah.
don't understand this at all, and didn't get it. So of course people hopped online and was like, what is he doing to us? Why that? But is that then his fault, or is it like a marketing issue? Is it just he's just too wrapped up in his own sort of like the persona they've given him that he just
Yeah.
can't make new work?
He doesn't only just write horror books, but I think that's mostly what he's known for, because he's got short stories as well as the ones that everyone knows. And I don't remember what it is, but I remember reading that he has like a pen name that has like a different set of other books, but I don't think they're horror books. So I think he does write other things, but the most popular thing he does is horror, which I think is what most people want
Yeah.
him
And I
to
think it's
do.
like when you think of Stephen King,
You think
from all these like
horror.
amazing movies, you think like Stephen King straight away, like horror,
Horror.
kind of like almost gore in some senses,
Yeah.
Yeah.
like The Shining with like that elevator full of blood, like the dead woman in like the shower.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's all these things where it's like, oh, we want this kind of like
I remember that.
It's like
this
shock
very
value.
like visceral idea of like
Yeah.
Stephen
Yeah.
King, where I feel like he might even feel a little bit like trapped in that persona of horror,
Yeah,
because
definitely.
he could want to make like different books, write different genres, but then the fan base is like, oh no, we're like die hard
want
Stephen
more
fan
horror.
horror.
It's like-
We want more of this like Stephen King.
Yeah, I remember when I was reading Misery, and the funniest thing with that was that I watched a film of it as well, and the film did pretty well. Like the actress for Annie Wilkes was like one of the
Kathy
first
Bates.
women. Pardon?
Kathy
Kathy
Bates.
Bates.
Thank you.
She's in
Kathy
American
Bates.
Horror Story.
Yeah. She was like the first like woman to win like an Oscar for like a horror film. And the thing is though, is that when I was watching the film, I realised that it's so much more censored than the book. The book is so much more gory.
It is censored a lot.
Yeah.
For a good reason.
Yeah, for good reason.
Like,
'cause-
especially the ending. Like, if you've read that book with the Losers Club, you'll know the ending of the first one, but like, you can't.
yeah, a lot of them are like
Do that.
much censored. So I remember watching like forgetting Misery, because the one I've actually read, he like fully cuts his foot off, and then the
Yeah.
film they're like, we're just gonna get a sledgehammer and like break it.
Yeah.
Still awful, but I was like,
It's like
I-
toned
I
down.
Yeah,
feel
it's
like
toned
the
down.
shock value's taken
Yeah.
out of it.
which is funny because that's the one thing that we're going. Well, we've just established that that's the one thing that people are like, we want this gore and horror. We want to be disturbed. We want to be scared. And then they watch the films and they like the films as well that are someone else's like interpretation.
Yeah.
And it's kind of the same sort of. It's just not giving you the same thing, but like the fan base is still like, we like it still because it's what he's done. I think that's kind of like the problem with like creators. They're like, we want this one thing,
Yeah.
and we will not like get it away from you. And you were saying about with like the 80s nostalgia, because that's where all the filmmakers keep going. They don't really look at the more recent things. Maybe in a few years they might, maybe, because I have heard good things about The Outsider. Some people have liked it. Maybe it just hit different. I don't know. It was only people's views that I can comment on, but it was really something that I feel like didn't hit the same way. So it really starts to beg the question: is he still relevant? So he's written over 50 books, and he's continually. He had a big stage where like a lot of his things. So a lot of like Misery was like 1987. It was 1986. Pet Sematary was 1983. So they're all kind of in that one stage. Something must have happened to him in those few years that he was like, I'm now the most productive person. So, and something he once said was his biggest fear of writing is that he wouldn't know when to stop. So really is the question, have we reached that point? Is it time to stop? Because he's sitting on quite a bit of money now. He's the fifth.
A bit.
Yeah, his net worth, I looked it up, was like 400 million or something. And he's like the fifth richest author, I think, after quite a few other people from like most recent studies. So I don't think retiring is going to do him any like problems.
Yeah.
But I guess then it's his craft, it's his hobby. Like he doesn't want to let it go. So what would you agree? Would you say yeah, he should keep on writing because it's what he does, or is he good? Is he set for life kind of now?
You could say, like, from one aspect, you could be like, he's brought out his, like, best work, you could say. Like, if we're saying, like, more modern books are getting more kind of...
Derailing.
Yeah, if they're kind of, like, getting less kind of that Stephen King kind of vibe and getting lower in kind of... not lower in quality, but, like, the fans see it in that way.
Yeah.
Like, you could argue, like, he should just be like, I'm done, here's my work, enjoy it, relish in it.
Yeah.
But then there's the other side where if he's saying like his worst fear is to stop writing, maybe he's just like spend more time just really focusing on one.
Do you feel that way about the films then? Do you have any, like, did you see the recent kind of films, like, It and things?
I've seen bits. I've not seen the whole thing, to be fair.
Yeah.
I have liked the recent adaptations,
Yeah.
but it's like I feel like they should just maybe focus on adapting more of these more modern books, just to see like if there's one with a good plot line and you can see it working out well. I think they should just kind of like take a whack at one of the newer books instead of keep falling back to his older books. Because obviously, if we keep going with the same old books, it's going to be the same story, even if it is like adapted in a new way. Whereas to get some kind of like fresh content and like newer content to see where he's like developed on since, I think it'd be interesting to see like one of these newer books adapted into a movie.
Because I feel like if they maybe started adapting more of the modern ones, maybe people that don't know who he is would be more attracted to that. And then you'd get sort of more people or newer people into the sort of fan base and be like, oh, this is really cool. But like there'll be more fans of the modern ones, which means he could carry on writing with the modern ones.
Like when you said he has over 50 books, I didn't even realise, like I knew he had like quite a few, but I didn't realise like over 50.
Yeah, like I said, short stories.
Yeah,
as well.
from wearing like... from wearing like pop culture, I see the same kind of 5 or 6
You
books.
can name like 5.
Yeah.
And maybe one really old one, and that's about it.
Yeah, it's definitely something that people just don't want to let go of. And
I feel like it's the 80s era no one's letting go of. It's like The Shining, like that section no one wants to let
It's
go
like
of
the
it.
30-year loop, isn't it? Like the every 30 decades, like the decade before becomes like popular again.
I think it is because
heard
like
that.
the 80s for some reason with his books, that's the only ones that people seem to care about. Not anyone before it and not anyone after it. It's just that
late
specific
70s
set.
had a bit late because Carrie is late 70s.
Yeah.
Well, actually, it's early 70s, 74. And The Shining is late 70s. It's definitely that.
Yeah.
It's definitely that era. It's, but I guess also now, filmmaking has evolved also along with his work. So I mean, because it has had an original film. I think Carrie
Carrie has.
It did.
Carrie had original, and then they remade it. Obviously, it's definitely been remade with like the newer technology, the brighter stuff, and it's got all that different sort of sound effects and design and things and
Like CGI, like all these new techniques.
The effects are a lot
especially
better.
horror kind of hits different now to then.
Yeah.
So when I think of like The Shining, I don't think you think of like a jump scare horror. You don't go there expecting to be like on the edge of your seat.
Yeah.
That's
You're
more like
It's more like
psychological.
psychological.
yeah, you're more disturbed. You're confused, and it makes you uncomfortable.
And it looks so real as well because a lot of it was like live effects.
Yeah.
So you get that more like kind of, oh, that's actually happening.
And again, I haven't read it, but I imagine it's probably similar, a lot of the older ones where they try to look more psychological because a book reads different than a film. You can't really jump scare a book; it doesn't really work that way. You can just close it again. So I feel like that's why he was coming good at horror, because he mastered that art of disturbing you through word. But then a film, obviously, it does something different. It focuses
disturbs
on,
visually.
Yeah, visually, because if you're going to a cinema in like a dark room and you have the sound all around you and you're looking to get scared, faces on the screen, which is why I'll never go see them because I'll just burst into tears. But it's that sort of, because filmmaking's evolved, I feel like then his work is evolving. So like it's gonna be like a generation who will know it as what we've got now, not the original book.
Yeah.
The original book is thick. The original book
It's
is
a very long book.
big book. The fact that people read it is quite
because it is like chapter 1 and 2 together, whereas the movies are split in half, with them being kids and then them being adults, whereas the book covers both.
But you see, then because those films have kind of become a new sort of genre for horror, they're new defining for modern audiences. Do you then think that it's kind of taken away from his original image? Like, do you still enjoy it as much as you probably would like his original works if you were like hardcore, really big fans?
I don't know. If I was like a hardcore fan, I feel like seeing a new version, I might think it's kind of like just like a money kind of grab.
Yeah,
being
that's
like,
what I
oh,
thought,
like slap his name on it. It's Stephen King.
Yeah.
But also harking back to talking about kind of like the 80s nostalgia, I think people loved kind of like the original movie so much and kind of like horror genre things set in the 80s because I'm like 80s and 70s. is almost like the isolation and like the lack of technology.
Yeah, because I think that's where like slasher movies
Yeah.
like Friday the 13th and like Mary Elm Street, like, the
Halloween
basic
things.
because it's
slasher
like,
movies come from that.
it's
Yeah.
like in those, it's like, oh, we're in the woods. Like there's no like, because nowadays like everyone has like a mobile phone. Like
Yeah.
you're connected to people like wherever you go. Whereas back then, if you
You
were
don't have
like
that.
running through the woods being chased by a murderer,
You're like
you can't call
911, sorry.
anyone. Like you have to find a phone booth and be
You know,
like,
it's scream
Yeah.
or die.
yeah,
like.
literally.
They did that. I think that's one thing that's really, again, Misery, because the one book I actually can talk informed about the whole idea that he got in a car crash and now he's in the middle of nowhere with this psychotic woman who's a nurse and who is giving him like pills and drugs so he can't really think straight. And even though he's like a national like author, which I always found funny because I felt like Stephen King, we may be self-inserting a bit here about having this author who's been really popular for a set of works but now can't escape his own craft. But I guess that really was the big thing, was you're trapped. And like you said, with like that time period, people
Yeah.
were really into that sort of idea because technology was new, it was just coming out, it was just not everyone really could have it then. And then the idea that, because we don't really go out and see like farmhouses and things on the slopes
Yeah.
now, but then they did
Yeah.
and they were like
Where everything's getting so like urbanized now.
Yeah.
It's like even in like, because back then like a rural area really would have been like rural,
yeah.
like fields and like small villages, whereas now everywhere is getting like new technology. Like you can't go anywhere where you're really like isolated almost, unless you're like literally in the middle of like the mountains, like the woods.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
think that kind of like plays into that thing of where maybe like more modern works, set I assume like in more
Yeah.
modern times, it kind of makes that suspense of like being completely isolated or like victimized kind of more difficult.
yeah, it's definitely that era. But yeah, I think we've gone quite a few places that we've kind of branched out. So, got any final thoughts, really quick to wrap up, or no? Fair enough. Thank you both very much for coming. I'm really happy you came. Appreciate it a lot. And if you're new around here, go check out some of the other cool stuff that we've got here done by The Bubble. I recommend it. I think you should see us. And we'll catch you later. Bye.